A long day of school, errands, and chores had left me stiff and aching. My stepbrother John, who had always been oddly perceptive about my moods, appeared at the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. "You look tense," he said, his deep voice soft, but with an edge that always made me notice him more than I wanted to. "Let me help." I hesitated, studying him for a moment. He had a way of making ordinary gestures feel intimate. But I shrugged, too tired to resist. "I guess, if you want." John smiled, and there was something in it that sent a flutter through me, a nervous anticipation I couldn't name. He knelt behind me and placed his hands gently on my shoulders. The first touch was innocent, comforting even, easing the knots of tension that had built up over the week. "Relax," he murmured, and I did, letting the warmth of his hands soothe my aching muscles. But then, the warmth lingered longer than usual. His fingers traced the contours of my shoulder blades, and a shiver ran down my spine, not from comfort, but from something electric, something forbidden. My heart began to race as I shifted slightly, trying to remind myself that he was my stepbrother, and no matter how complicated our family had become, there were boundaries that should never be crossed. John didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned a little closer, and his hands moved with a confidence that both alarmed and tempted me. I froze, unsure whether to speak up or stay silent. "Does it hurt here?" he asked, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. I nodded, trying to focus on the pain rather than the way my body reacted to his touch. "A little, it's just stress." He didn't say anything, just continued, and that silence became heavier, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. My mind raced, this was wrong, and yet part of me didn't want it to stop. Hours later, though it felt like minutes, he finally withdrew his hands. I could feel the tension leaving my body, but not the tension in the air. Something had shifted between us, something unspoken but undeniably present. I stayed in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, the memory of his touch haunting me. I told myself it was just a favor, that I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass surrounding our home, carrying a scent of rain and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and I shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of what had just happened. John knocked on my door later that night. "Everything okay?" he asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed a storm beneath. I nodded quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He lingered for a moment, then left. And in that brief exchange, I realized that we were both pretending nothing had changed. But the truth was, something had changed, and I could feel the ripple effect of that night settling into every corner of my life. I didn't know it then, but that simple favor, an innocent massage, would haunt me for years, shaping every decision, every glance, and every heartbeat in ways I could never have imagined. The next morning, the golden light of the South African sunrise spilled over the rolling hills surrounding our home. I could hear the distant call of hornbills and the rustle of leaves in the early breeze. But despite the beauty outside, I felt trapped inside my own mind. Every movement, every sound reminded me of John's touch the previous night. I tried to act normal at breakfast, forcing a smile as my stepfather chatted about work and the upcoming family trip. John sat across from me, his usual easy charm in place, but I noticed the subtle way he avoided my eyes. Or maybe it was me avoiding his. Either way, the tension between us was like a live wire, and I couldn't help but feel the charge every time he was near. "You're quiet this morning," John finally said, breaking the silence. His tone was casual, but there was a quiet intensity beneath it that made my stomach twist. "I'm fine," I replied quickly, forcing a sip of my coffee. My fingers shook slightly, though I tried to hide it. He tilted his head, studying me. "You don't seem fine," he said softly. His voice carried a warmth that confused me, a familiarity that was dangerous. You know you can tell me anything, right? I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him as I always had, but a part of me recoiled. Trust had a new, fragile quality now. It had been tested, and I wasn't sure if it could survive. After breakfast, I wandered outside into the garden, the scent of frangipani and wet earth soothing me slightly. The last thing I wanted was to see John again so soon, yet there he was, leaning against the veranda railing, looking out over the valley as if he belonged to the landscape itself. "Morning," he said, his voice softer than before. I nodded, keeping my distance. He pushed off the railing and walked toward me. My heart raced with anticipation and fear. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward yesterday," he said. His eyes searched mine for some sign of forgiveness, of understanding. I shook my head, unable to speak. The words wouldn't come. How could I explain that the line had been crossed, that I felt both violated and strangely drawn to him? The contradiction terrified me. John sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I didn't mean to," he started, then stopped, realizing words couldn't fix what had happened. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint freckles across his nose and the curve of his lips. Close enough that the air between us felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. "John, please," I whispered, trying to put a safe distance between us. But my body betrayed me, frozen in a mixture of fear and longing. He didn't push. He simply nodded, stepping back, but the tension lingered, palpable. "I'll give you space," he said quietly, though the faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips suggested he wasn't planning to stay away for long. I spent the rest of the day avoiding him, burying myself in homework, chores, and the solace of my favorite reading nook. But every glance toward the veranda, every sound from the kitchen, reminded me that John's presence was everywhere, inescapable and insistent. That evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps behind me. My heart thudded. I turned slowly. John was there, holding a small cup of tea. "You looked tired," he said simply. I thought this might help. I hesitated, my hands trembling as I reached for it. "Thank you," I murmured, but my voice barely carried the words. We sat in silence, the last light of day washing over us. And in that silence, I realized the truth I had been denying. That night had changed everything. The line had been crossed, and nothing could return us to the innocent familiarity we once had. And yet, somewhere deep down, a small, forbidden part of me hoped it wouldn't matter. Absolutely. Here are chapters 3 to 6 in the same style, suspenseful, romantic, and emotionally intense, keeping the South African setting intact. Each chapter is written to flow naturally from the previous one. Sleep came fitfully that night, the wind carrying a distant howl from the veldt. I lay awake, staring at the wooden beams of my ceiling, replaying every second of yesterday in my mind. John's hands, the softness of his touch, the way he had looked at me, it all lingered, making me feel both guilty and strangely alive. I told myself it had been a mistake. Just a moment of weakness. But the heart rarely listens to logic, and mine had already betrayed me. Thoughts of speaking to someone, anyone, about it, crossed my mind. But who could understand? My friends would never believe it. My mother, she would be furious, and I wasn't ready to face that storm. By morning, my stomach churned at the sight of him eating breakfast across from me. The casual smile, the easy conversation, it was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he acknowledge what had happened. Yet, each time our eyes met, I found myself softening, caught in that forbidden gravity that now pulled me toward him. I tried to immerse myself in schoolwork, losing myself in books and assignments, but even my thoughts betrayed me. Every quiet moment was invaded by flashes of that night. I wondered if he remembered, if he regretted it too, or if he was pretending, as I had been, that nothing had happened. When he texted me later, asking if I was okay, my fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I typed the simplest response I could manage: "I'm fine." I pressed send, my stomach twisting in anticipation. Hours passed, and he didn't reply. I told myself he was busy, that it didn't mean anything, but a small voice inside whispered that it did. That night, I lay awake again, feeling the weight of unspoken words between us, a tension that had started as a touch, but had grown into something much more dangerous. The following weekend, the house felt quieter than usual. My stepfather had gone on a business trip, leaving John and me alone under the same roof. The thought should have brought relief, but instead, it made my pulse quicken. I caught glimpses of him around the house, his presence always just outside my line of sight, and it was maddening. I tried to keep busy, helping in the kitchen, tidying the garden, avoiding him at all costs. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. That afternoon, I found myself on the veranda, trying to read, when I felt a shadow fall across the page. "Can I join you?" he asked softly, holding a glass of juice. I hesitated, then nodded, and he sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm, though he made no move to touch me. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, the tension almost unbearable. We spoke in small talk at first, school, friends, plans, but every word was underlined with a tension neither of us acknowledged. I wanted to leave, but something kept me rooted there, afraid that if I moved, I might unravel, and he might see the storm inside me. Then he leaned slightly closer, just enough that I felt it, and my heart skipped a beat. "Evelyn, about the other night," he murmured, his voice low and hesitant. My throat went dry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I wanted to tell him it was fine, that it had been just a fleeting moment, but I couldn't. My voice caught, and I only managed a whisper, "I know." He nodded slowly, eyes searching mine. There was an intensity there that made me shiver. I don't want things between us to change," he said. And I realized with a jolt that it already had. Nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed were unbearable. I felt trapped in my own home, haunted by memories of that night and the uncertainty of John's intentions. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands, made my pulse race. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront him, couldn't demand clarity, because part of me feared the truth. I started spending more time outside, wandering the garden and the surrounding fields, hoping the open air might clear my mind. The sun-drenched hills, the smell of earth after rain, the distant calls of birds, it all should have calmed me. But it didn't. Every shadow felt like him watching, every breeze carried his presence. One evening, as the sky turned a bruised purple and orange, I found myself sitting on the porch swing, the cool evening air brushing my skin. John appeared silently behind me, carrying a blanket. "Here," he said, draping it over my shoulders. His hands lingered just a moment too long, and I felt a wave of heat rush through me. I wanted to pull away, to scream at him for making things so complicated, but I didn't. Instead, I let the warmth settle, both physical and emotional. The swing creaked as we sat together in silence, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to forget, to pretend the night had never happened. But as the stars blinked awake in the sky above, reality returned. I realized with a pang that I could never escape this, not while he was here, not while we shared the same home. The weight of that night, of choices made and boundaries crossed, pressed down on me with relentless force. School became a haven and a prison at once. I buried myself in studies, after-school activities, anything to distract myself from the turmoil at home. But no matter how busy I became, my thoughts drifted back to him. Every smile, every casual touch, replayed itself in my mind, leaving me simultaneously longing and ashamed. One rainy afternoon, as I returned home, I found the veranda empty and the house strangely silent. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt exposed, vulnerable. I stepped into the living room, and there he was, standing by the window, staring out at the storm. His silhouette was dark against the grey light, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Evelyn," he said, turning slowly. His voice was calm, but carried that unmistakable tension. "We need to talk." My heart lurched. The words I had feared and longed for all at once hung between us. I nodded, unsure what to say. He walked toward me, slow, deliberate, and stopped just a step away. "I can't pretend nothing happened," he admitted. "And I don't want to. But I also don't want to lose you, or have this destroy what we have as family." I swallowed hard, my emotions tangled in confusion and desire. "John." He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. "I know," he said softly. And in that moment, the storm outside mirrored the one within me, the tension between what was right and what I couldn't deny. For the first time, I realized the full weight of that night. It had changed us forever, and there was no turning back. The following week at school was unbearable. Every laugh, every passing glance from friends, felt distant and hollow compared to the storm inside me. I caught myself staring at John in my mind, replaying the moments when his presence lingered, when his touch had burned itself into my memory. It was maddening, addictive, and terrifying all at once. I tried to focus on my lessons, scribbling notes mechanically as my teacher droned on about algebra and physics. But my mind wandered, imagining the veranda, the evening breeze, the warmth of his hands brushing against mine. I could feel a blush rising even now, in the middle of the classroom. After school, I walked home through the winding streets of my small town, the autumn wind tugging at my hair. The veldt stretched endlessly beyond the last houses, its tall grasses swaying like ghosts in the distance. I felt a shiver, half from the chill, half from the anticipation I couldn't ignore. I arrived at the house to find John in the garden, kneeling among the flower beds, his fingers buried in the soil. He looked up as I approached, and for a second, I thought he would smile and wave, but he didn't. There was a serious, almost heavy look in his eyes that made my chest tighten. "Evelyn," he said quietly, standing up. His posture was casual, but the gravity of his gaze left me breathless. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "This, between us," he admitted. "It's confusing, wrong, and yet I can't ignore it. I don't want to hurt you, but I can't go back to being just your stepbrother. Not after that night." I felt a rush of fear and longing. The forbiddenness of it all made my heart pound. "John, we can't," I whispered, trying to sound stronger than I felt. He stepped closer, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I know," he said softly. "But I also know that avoiding it doesn't erase it." Sleep that night eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the intensity of his gaze, the curve of his lips when he smiled ever so slightly. I replayed our conversation in the garden, the words heavy with meaning, with temptation. The next morning, I found myself unusually quiet at breakfast. My mother noticed. "Evelyn, you've been distracted," she said. "Is something wrong at school?" I shook my head, forcing a small smile. "Nothing, Mom. Just tired." John watched me from across the table. His eyes were careful, wary, yet there was a softness there, one that made my chest tighten with longing and frustration. I could feel his gaze lingering, and I hated how much it affected me. Later, I found him in the lounge, reading. I wanted to avoid him, but something inside me drew me closer. "Can I sit?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded, moving to make space. We sat in silence for a long moment, the quiet only broken by the ticking of the wall clock. Then, he spoke softly. Evelyn. I've been thinking about that night, about us. And I don't want to make the same mistakes. But I also can't pretend it didn't happen. I swallowed hard, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. John. I don't know what to do, I admitted. I don't want to feel like this, and yet I can't stop thinking about you. His hand brushed mine, light and almost accidental, but the contact was enough to make my heart leap. Then we have to be honest, he said quietly, the tension between us crackling like lightning in the stormy sky outside. Days passed, and the house felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension between us. Every step we took, every room we entered, carried an unspoken charge. I couldn't escape it, and I didn't want to, though I knew I should. One afternoon, I was in my room, pretending to study, when I heard him at my door. Evelyn, can we talk? His voice was low, serious, almost pleading. I hesitated, but the sound of it drew me forward. Okay, I said softly. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The room felt smaller, the air thick with anticipation. I've been thinking, maybe we need to set boundaries, he admitted. For both our sakes. I nodded, relief and disappointment colliding inside me. Yes. I think that's a good idea. He smiled faintly, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. I'll try, he said. But I can't promise it will be easy. I understood. The night had changed everything, and no amount of rules could erase what had happened, or what we felt. We were bound together now, not by choice, but by desire and regret. That evening, the veldt glowed under the soft light of the setting sun, and I found myself walking toward the veranda, needing the quiet, needing the wind to calm the storm inside me. And there he was, standing there as if he belonged to the fading light itself. Evelyn, he said softly, walking toward me. I can't keep pretending that nothing happened. I know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. My heart pounded in my chest. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. But I also know I can't lose you, he admitted. I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't want to. I trembled, torn between fear and longing. John, we shouldn't. He silenced me with a soft look, full of intensity, and something tender I couldn't name. I know, he whispered. But neither of us can ignore it. For a long moment, we simply stood there, the wind carrying the scent of wet grass and the distant hills, the sun dipping lower behind the horizon. I realized that night that nothing would ever be the same. The tension between us had become something alive, dangerous, and irresistible, and I wasn't sure either of us was strong enough to resist. The following days were a battle between desire and reason. I avoided John as much as possible, yet somehow we always seemed to collide, in the kitchen, in the garden, in the living room. Each accidental touch, each fleeting glance, left me trembling and breathless. One evening, my mother asked me to help set up the veranda for dinner. As I arranged the tablecloth and glasses, John appeared behind me, carrying a tray of drinks. Need a hand? He asked, his voice gentle but deliberate. I flinched slightly at the closeness, but nodded. We worked in silence, the air heavy between us. His fingers brushed mine once, lightly, but it was enough to make my heart stutter. I looked away, trying to focus on the task, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching, measuring, almost waiting. Evelyn, he murmured, leaning slightly closer. My stomach twisted. I don't want to pressure you, but I can't stop thinking about you. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing on me. John, we can't, I whispered, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my desire. He nodded slowly, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. "I know," he said. "But neither of us can pretend it didn't happen." The dinner that followed was a mix of awkward conversation and stolen glances. I couldn't focus on my food, my mother's chatter, or even the sunset casting gold across the hills. My thoughts were consumed by him, by the dangerous, magnetic pull that had begun the night he crossed a line. School the next day offered little reprieve. My mind kept wandering to John, to the way he looked at me, to the way he had admitted he couldn't stop thinking about me. Each moment felt like a test of my self-control, a reminder that what we had was both wrong and irresistible. During lunch, I sat alone, pretending to read, when my best friend, Thandi, plopped down beside me. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "What's going on?" I hesitated, my throat tightening. How could I explain that the tension consuming me was my stepbrother? I forced a smile. "Just stressed about exams," I muttered, though she didn't look convinced. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in her gaze. "Is it someone at school?" I shook my head, my heart hammering. "No, nothing like that," I lied, biting my lip. Thandi leaned back, clearly unconvinced, but didn't press further. Later, walking home, the wind tugged at my skirt, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I imagined John waiting at the veranda, his dark eyes searching mine, his presence like a shadow I couldn't escape. The pull between us grew stronger with every passing day, and I knew that something had to give, or else we would both be consumed by it. That evening, as rain began to patter against the windows, I found myself alone in the lounge, trying to distract myself with a book. I wasn't really reading, my thoughts were entirely elsewhere. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside me, angry, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. "Evelyn," his voice came from behind me, soft and tentative. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. He appeared in the doorway, water beading on his dark hair, eyes intense and searching. "I know we shouldn't," he whispered, stepping closer. "But I can't help it. Every time I see you, every time I hear your voice, it pulls me in." I trembled, torn between fear and longing. "John, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We can't." He stopped a step away, the tension between us palpable. "I know," he said softly. "But we both know this isn't going away." The silence stretched, charged with unspoken words and forbidden desires. The storm outside roared, and I realized that it was nothing compared to the storm raging inside me. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, the rain hammering against the roof, imagining him there, imagining his hand on mine, imagining the dangerous pull that neither of us could resist. My thoughts raced, mixing desire and guilt, longing and regret, until I felt as though I might shatter under the weight of it. The next day, I tried to escape him entirely, hiding in the library, burying myself in books, hoping the hours would pass. But when I returned home, the veranda was empty, and yet I felt him everywhere, in the walls, in the air, in the very pulse of the house. That evening, I saw him walking toward the garden, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. My heart skipped a beat. "Evelyn," he said softly, offering them to me. "For you." I stared at the flowers, the gesture both innocent and laden with meaning. I wanted to refuse, to push him away, but my fingers brushed his as I took them. The contact was brief, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I shouldn't," I whispered, my voice trembling. He smiled faintly, a mixture of mischief and tenderness in his eyes. "I know," he said. "But some things can't be controlled." The tension between us tightened like a noose, and I realized that the night he had crossed a line was only the beginning. Something had awakened between us, something that could not be ignored, and the question now was whether we would survive it, or be consumed by it.